Hello, my name is Sophia Rodi, and today I've chosen to research the founder of Planned Parenthood and one of the leaders of the birth control movement, Margaret Sanger. Margaret was born in Corning, New York in 1879. Her mother gave birth to 11 children and had 7 miscarriages. During this time, it was very common for families to have more children than they could afford to care for, which was the case for Margaret's family. She grew up very poor, and her sisters helped pay for her private boarding school education. However, she had to pause her education when her mother became sick due to tuberculosis and then died later in 1899. She resumed her education at the White Plains Hospital in Westchester County, New York, where she received a license as a practical nurse. She wanted to continue her education and become a registered nurse, but her plans changed when she married William Sanger in 1902. Her and her husband started to become activists after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory of 1911. They started supporting the workers' rights movements and then later joined the Socialist Party. As a nurse, she witnessed many women who resorted to dangerous abortions because they could not afford the $5 for a safe abortion while being a nurse on the Lower East Side. Seeing all this inspired her to help these women escape poverty and the many illnesses and deaths that women had to face due to having too many pregnancies and not safe abortion options. During this time, there were also laws called the Comstock Laws, which made it illegal to produce and distribute sex, reproduction, or birth control information across state lines. Margaret then published an article called What Every Girl Should Know about Women's Sexual and Reproductive Health, but she did not mention any contraceptives in order to not violate the Comstock Laws. However, in 1914, she decided to publish her own paper called The Woman Rebel, and this violated the Comstock Laws because she provided information about different types of birth control methods. After defying the government and continuing to publish the paper, Margaret was arrested. She left the country before she pleaded guilty or not guilty. And then all of her ideas that I will explain in the next slide about family planning and different types of contraceptives laid the foundation for the development of Planned Parenthood. A story that greatly inspired Margaret was of Miss Sachs, who had almost died from a self-induced abortion. After her doctor gave her poor advice about how to not get pregnant again, she got pregnant again and tried again to perform a self-induced abortion. She went into a coma and later died in front of Margaret. This inspired her to make the world safe for women, especially in the realm of their reproductive health. While preparing her defense after getting arrested for the first time, she published the book Family Limitation, which described common methods of birth control. The book sold 10 million copies and later was called the Bible of the early birth control movement. Then, after fleeing the country, Margaret lived in England for a while and then visited the Netherlands, interested in the first nationwide network of birth control clinics. She met one of the head doctors of these clinics, Johannes Rutgers, who explained their healthcare system where doctors prescribed birth control rather than nurses. In 1915, she returned to America and started a cross-country tour describing different birth control methods and advocating for family planning services in the country. A woman who heard Margaret's lecture gave her $50, which Margaret then used to open the first birth control clinic in America in Brooklyn, New York in 1916. After only 10 days of being open, Margaret and her colleagues at the clinic were arrested, and then she then spent 30 days in jail, where she still continued to educate other inmates about birth control. After her release, she founded the first scientific journal that was dedicated to discussing birth control, called the Birth Control Review. Then again, Margaret was arrested in 1921 after organizing the first American birth control conference, which was opposed by the Catholic Church. However, this only increased the amount of support she had in the country, which she then used to form the American Birth Control League in 1922. This league's mission was to legalize birth control, and they also wanted to slow the growth of the world population and end world famines. Then, in 1923, Margaret opened the Birth Control Clinical Research Bureau, which gave out different forms of contraceptives from doctors. In 1936, the courts decided in U.S. v. one package of Japanese pessaries, which overturned the Comstock laws. However, it took until about 1970 for the Comstock laws to be thrown out in every state. In the 30s, Margaret was inspired by FDR's New Deal on social development and family planning, and she opened a family planning clinic in Harlem, New York, to provide reproductive health care to marginalized minorities. These clinics were supported by very influential Black leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois. Then she opened clinics in the rural South to serve poor African American women. She went on to create the Negro Project, whose purpose was to provide birth control methods to poor African American women in the rural South. However, this did not have much success because the clinics were run by white medical professionals, which went against what Margaret wanted originally, which was to fight against racism in women's reproductive health. She then went on to create the Division of Negro Service, which had African American advisors that helped the project to succeed. Although Margaret had a lot of success in her life, she did do some controversial things. For example, while on her cross-country tour, she spoke to a women's auxiliary of the Ku Klux Klan, which Planned Parenthood spoke out about in opposition. She also collaborated with the leaders of the eugenics movement, a movement which wanted to improve society through selective breeding. She endorsed the ruling of Buck v. Bell in 1927, which stated that the unfit in society could be sterilized. Then again, Planned Parenthood spoke out about her endorsement of the decision and her involvement in the eugenics movement. She had many people who did not support her. For example, the Catholic Church did not support her efforts, and they would often prevent her from speaking at public events in cities like Boston. Also, the Nazis were strong in their public disapproval of her and would publicly burn copies of her books in the 40s. One of Margaret's greatest achievements was providing the foundation for the development of the oral contraceptive, the pill. Catherine McCormick was a major collaborator in the development of the pill, who worked alongside Margaret Sanger and many other very influential corporations who provided the funding for this research. With McCormick's great knowledge of biochemistry and endocrinology, they created the pill. Then, on May 9, 1960, the U.S. FDA approved the first oral contraceptive for the purpose of menstrual regulation. By 1967, 13 million women were using the pill, and today about 100 million women use the pill regularly. So the big question is Margaret Sanger a hero or a villain? I believe that she is a hero because she created an organization, Planned Parenthood, that made abortion safe for women. However, she advocated for women's health in other aspects. When people think of Planned Parenthood, they focus on it as a place of abortions, but it is much more than that. It provides many educational resources, access to medical care, and different forms of contraceptive, and especially to many women who would not have access to this otherwise. Thank you.